right. Hey, welcome to Rick's Corner. I have a champion sitting here with me who I've known for years and I always looked up to and admired. And his name is Boyer Coe. And he's won, I went and did a Wikipedia. You had so many titles that I don't even know where to begin.
Well, to be honest with you, Rick, I've competed for a long time, but I really wasn't that much into competition. I more or less looked at the bodybuilding competition was just a way to measure my progress.
Right.
And it really wasn't even so matter about what the judges gave me, because quite honestly, I never had a whole lot of respect for the judges.
I don't think anybody did.
You know, particularly in the years with the AAU. I was thinking about when I was driving over here, and I recall a time, I think it was back in, it must have been 1968, when Jim Hazlett won the Mr. America. And one of the contestants in the contest, and I'm sure you remember him, was Dr. Craig Whitehead.
Oh, of course, sure.
And at that time, this was during the Vietnam War, when you went into the service, if you were a physician, a doctor, you went in with the title of captain.
That's right, you're
so
an officer.
Here he is, he's a captain. And these AAU officials just talked to us like we were a bunch of pigs or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember that was the last contest that Craig competed in. He says, he says, I'm a captain in the Air Force. I don't have to take this. And he got up and walked out of the prejudging. And, of course, I was only, maybe 18, 19. You don't know really what to do, so I didn't leave. But I admired him for that. It just wasn't worth it. So what I looked for in the contest was a way of measuring my progress. And fortunately, I had some guys that I've grown up with who was brutally honest with the way you look. I mean, You might win a contest and say, hey, you don't look worth a damn. You didn't improve from last time. So that's what I kind of gauged my progress on, was that. So it was not so much trying to win the contest, but just self-improvement.
But you won a lot of contests.
Yeah, well, it was around I had an interesting career, a long career.
Yeah, and you had a perfect score in one of them, I read.
Yeah, well, I don't remember any of this. You can barely remember who won one contest to the next when the guy talks about, I was second or third.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Who cares? Everybody up there's a winner.
Sure.
They're all working hard. They're all winners.
Exactly.
And it's basically someone's opinion of you.
Well, that's what it is. It's always just a matter of an opinion.
Exactly. Well, I did the same thing. I competed a couple of contests when I was training in Venice, and I was into wrestling back then. I thought, I don't want to do this. It's a trophy, and I know how I look. I look in the mirror, and I'll put it in the ring and be on TV, and that'll make me money, and the trophy won't.
Very true.
So I took it to that level. You started training at what age?
Actually, seriously, I was 14, but by the time I was 13, I started fooling around with it. And you have to remember, I was back in the days where the only exposure to bodybuilding was what you got in the magazines. I recall the first magazine I looked at was Strength and Health.
Sure.
So you always looked at it and tried to read it. And at that time, everything was weightlifting. Hoffman reluctantly put bodybuilding into the magazine.
That's
so
true.
You only got little bits and pieces, and then later on, Joe came with his magazine, and in the magazine that I truly loved was Iron Man. Perry Rader only came out with that once every 2 months. But
right.
God, it was just packed with, you couldn't wait to get the mag. And it was all black and white except for the cover. But
and great photos.
Oh, great photos, yeah. And a lot of information. And that's what I was always interested in, was the knowledge, how to do something,
Did you know a lot about diet back then?
Nothing. No.
Did you just eat what you wanted?
I read articles about John Grimmick, and I greatly admired John. And his thing was, back in his day, you got to eat a lot to get big.
Yeah.
So I just ate as much as I could, drank as much milk as I could. And I remember my dad saying he never realized how much our milk bill was until I went off to college. And he said, I must have supported a herd of cattle with this amount of milk you drank.
My mom did the same thing. She says, I can't believe how much milk you're going through. And then I started drinking extra rich milk because the guys in Venice said, you got to get the extra rich stuff with the cream because the fat gives you more energy to burn, like the Rio Blair method.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember going to restaurants down at the beach with some of the guys, and they were going to tables and drinking the creamers because it was real cream in there. It wasn't that artificial stuff, Got to have that cream. But diet wasn't really too knowledgeable a thing back then. We didn't know what to do.
Well, the interesting thing, diet was never a real key part, and I certainly remember the Rio Blair area, and Larry Scott was more or less poster boy, and I don't know why but because I could never, I was in college, I could never afford the real Blair products because they were really expensive at the time.
Very.
But he was nice enough to send me supplements free of charge, which I used. I attempted to try it with the cream, and I noticed that I just started to smooth out. So I just mixed it with water.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge of that, and certainly no cardio.
Yeah, no
Nobody. There wasn't even so much as a stationary bike in the gym when I first started working out. And it's a shame to say that, but to be honest with you, I still hate cardio. I just find it boring as hell.
Well, it's really funny because Arnold introduced me to Rio, and he put me on a program. He had me sign an endorsement, and I started taking his protein and his hydrochloric acid tablets and his B-complex tablets and all that, and I'd go over once a month and stock up. And it was good stuff. And the funny thing is, that little statue right there is a Rio Blair vitamin B bottle that I put paper mache on. I made a bodybuilder out of it. And a light bulb for the head. And it's been sitting there for like 30 years.
I can recall how expensive his products were. And one of the supplements that he promoted, which I'd never had an opportunity to try, he had something called free amino acids.
Yes.
And I remember Don Holworth telling me about it.
Yes.
But he couldn't afford it either. You know, it was like $150 a bottle. And this is back in the mid-'60s.
That's right.
That might have been $1,000 worth today. You just couldn't.
That was a year's salary.
Yeah,
that was a year's salary.
You couldn't even think about buying something.
Somebody
like
came
that.
out with his product, his protein, a few years ago, and they emailed me about it. And it was still like $300 for like, I don't know, 10 pounds of it. No, I'm not going to spend that on there. There's enough products around. But you trained on eating anything, yet you were massive and ripped. So how did you stay so lean?
Well, like it in most instances with everybody, a lot of it has to do just with genetics.
Yeah.
You know, my dad was never overweight. He was always an athlete, always kept himself in good shape. And I did say I ate everything, but I didn't eat a lot of junk. I ate good food,
right.
You know. And even today I don't really follow any kind of strict diet. I don't eat any desserts. Occasionally I'll have something, but usually basically protein, vegetables. I try to stay away from red meat. Eat a lot of chicken, turkey, fish.
Basically.
Yeah, basic stuff. You know, I do take some supplements, some vitamins. I give hell on the fish oil. I believe in that.
Yeah.
They say it's good for your heart, but nothing very elaborate.
Do you still train every day?
I still train. I train 6 days a week.
Yeah.
It's
hard not to.
It's hard. I mean, I don't spend 3 or 4 hours in the gym anymore because I don't have time.
No.
But I'm in the gym every morning at 5 o'clock. I'm usually the first guy who walks through the door. And I'm in there for about hour and a half.
Tops.
Yeah.
You don't need more than that.
Oh, no. I was never a guy that hung around the gym all day long simply because I always had a job to get to.
Well, that's the thing. You know, I mean, I'm the same way. I go in for an hour, maybe an hour, 10 minutes with a little cardio, which I do now, and I'm done. I don't want to spend more time than that.
Well, yeah, you get in, you get out, and you move on to other things in life.
Right. Do you find it hard to maintain muscle density and mass as you get older?
Well, I think, quite honestly, I never had a problem maintaining muscle mass. I was until I was about 50.
Yeah.
And then I noticed it become harder and harder to hang on to your muscle mass. You know, I keep my body weight at right about 200 simply because I don't want to get any heavier than that, you know. But then I'm not sure, even if I tried, I could get a lot heavier than that. It gets harder to put on new muscle mass as you get older.
It's definitely harder. And I've had some severe injuries from wrestling, so my joints hurt, my knees, and I go and I train. I get a pretty good pump, and I stay lean. I'm probably 25 pounds lighter this past 6 months, which I dropped. But I notice, even in my biceps, I notice they don't fill out the skin like they did way back. You know, in certain, around the pec, it doesn't fill out like it did. Even though I train hard and eat right, it does take a change as you get older.
Well, one of the things, and I've discussed this with a lot of people as they get older, no matter how hard you train, you just don't seem to be able to quite get the pump in the muscle that you used to. I mean, you train earlier, and sometimes your muscle would get so pumped you feel like the skin was going to
Oh, my God, yeah.
You just don't quite get that feeling anymore. But I've been very fortunate to have no injuries, can still train, I would say, considerably heavy, nothing extreme. But I've always been a great believer in warming up before I work out, and complete movements, complete extension, complete contraction, no little half movements. I'm not saying that makes a great difference, but it's worked for me.
Well, it does, because the muscle has a full range of motion. When you do half movements, it's not getting it, obviously. And I've gone through periods myself, just like you're saying, where you go and you just don't get a pump. And my strength is there and everything is the same, but there's none of that. Now, I started taking Waxamaze. You've heard of Waxamaze?
I'm not familiar with it. I've heard of it.
Okay,
yeah.
It's like a complex carb before you train, and that seemed to help me get a little bit of a pump. Maybe it's just a little bit of sugar.
Well, I'll have to give that a try.
Oh, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. That and nitrix, which is supposed to dilate the blood vessels. But as you get older, I remember I was telling my son I used to go in the gym and I'd do a couple of sets of curls and I couldn't even bend my arms.
Oh yeah, you would. It's you definitely don't get that same feeling as you used to.
Yeah. Back then, steroids weren't a big thing, but there were some, and I took some stuff that I had gotten from Europe, and I did get good progress off it. And then when I'd go off, I didn't lose it as much because I didn't overload on it. But you look at the bodies back then, and people had mentioned to me they prefer the golden era, and everybody had a unique body, and you could put masks on everybody. You knew who they were because their bodies were so entirely different compared to today.
Well, you could. There's definitely a tremendous difference. As a matter of fact, there was a time at the Mr. Olympia, at the introduction of each contestant, the first thing you saw on the screen was a silhouette of each guy. You could immediately identify if that was Frank Zane or Chris Dickerson or something like that.
Yes.
And it does appear to me that everyone looks the same, but I really think it's just a matter of progression. And you mentioned the steroids, and I've never shied away from that. At one time, a guy mentioned that to me. He says, I always seem to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Because I go all the way back to when basically steroids first became available.
Right.
And it was just by accident. Ziegler invented it, obviously for the weightlifting team.
Right.
How I knew about it so early in life, Alvin Roy, who was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was in the service that time, was a captain or colonel in the service. He was from Baton Rouge, but he was stationed in Germany. He acquired proper training quarters and proper food for the Olympic team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he became friends with Ziegler, so he immediately learned about Dianabol.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so when he came back, he was always a great advocate of weightlifting for football teams.
Mm-hmm.
So Astruma High School in Baton Rouge and then LSU was actually the first weight-trained football team in the nation. And he also gave them Dianabol.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happened some of those members lived in the town I grew up in, Lake Charles, so they told me about it.
Yeah.
So my first experience with it was, I guess, back when I was around 17.
Yeah.
Now, it made me stronger.
Yeah.
But I never gained that much weight off it, probably because I simply didn't take enough. And I discussed this with John Grimmick one time. He says, he said, I was disappointed when I tried it because I didn't really notice any increase in my size. But, I mean, 1 5-milligram tablet is not good, and that's all you took,
Well, I remember I was 17 and I took it too. I used to get a bottle for $8, and I would do one a day. But I did notice, and it wasn't that much in strength. In the mirror, I did look better, and I got a good.
Well,
pump.
you got harder looking, but I definitely noticed a great increase in my strength because, like I said, I was 17. I probably weighed somewhere around 175, 180. And my goal always was to bench press 400 before I got out of high school.
Right.
And I'd kind of hit a sticking point. Well, after that, man, it just shot right past 400, no problem at all, which was, to me, it made me real proud of that.
Did you take anything else besides that?
That was all that was available back in those days.
As time went on?
Now, as time...